Live from Washington, I'm Aisha Tanzim and you're watching Access Point. Hello and welcome. Many in Pakistan are speculating whether the talks between the government and TTP will succeed. The government tells us that if they fail, there will be a military operation. But no one is talking about what happens if the talks succeed. What will be the impact on Pakistani society? Will it become more tolerant or more extreme? What about relations with neighbors and Pakistan's standing in the world? Let's ask our guests. Madhiya Afzal is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. She is also a non-resident fellow at the Brookings. Dr. Hassan Askari Rizvi joins us from Lahore via Skype. He's a renowned political and defense analyst. And Aurea Makbul Jan is a columnist, writer, and a former civil servant of Pakistan. He's also joining us from Lahore via Skype. Welcome to Access Point. Dr. Rizvi, let me start with you. We know what the Taliban want. We know very little about what the government wants, so we have to go by past examples. Let's say there's a SWAT-like deal. Taliban agree to give up violence in return for a safe haven in North Waziristan where they get to implement their version of Sharia. Where do we go from there?
I think if that kind of solution is found, that they have a safe haven where they can function as an authority autonomous of Pakistan, that's going to be a very problematic situation, not only for Pakistan, but also for region, because such an authority will have no international obligations and it would be free to do what it wants. Therefore, it is going to be a cause of major concern for all the states of the region who do not have a positive view of the Taliban in that part of the world. So far as Pakistan is concerned, it's going to be a problem because the neighboring state like Afghanistan will be complaining from time to time on this issue. And then the Taliban are not expected to confine themselves to an enclave and live peacefully ever after. If that happens, that would be an excellent solution. But that's not likely to happen because if you're an ideological group, you want your ideology to flourish. You want others to follow your ideology. And given their linkages in mainland Pakistan, they will try to expand their influence within Pakistan. And the final point would be that there are some groups in the tribal areas who do not fall in line with the Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan. And those groups can pursue their independent strategy. They can resort to violence. And for people of Pakistan and for state of Pakistan, violence will continue to be a problem, even if Taliban have an enclave of their choice, if that kind of option is adopted.
Madhiya, you've written extensively that Taliban have proven themselves, particularly TTP, has proved itself to be very media savvy, and they're winning the propaganda war. What happens ideologically to Pakistani society if a deal is made with them and they're given more legitimacy and therefore more access to media?
I mean, I think the sort of scenario that's sort of most simple is that Pakistani society falls in line more and more with Taliban-style thinking, right? So they become ideologically more conservative, more intolerant. However, there could be a backlash, right? If a deal like a SWAT kind of deal happens now, there could be a backlash if the Taliban are given sort of the space to be violent, to rule over North Waziristan, like it happened in 2009, the kind of backlash that happened in 2009. So public opinion could turn against the Taliban, and we could see sort of an ideological opening up of society, right, if a backlash occurs. But I think the simplistic sense that I would have is that things become worse before they become better.
Aurea, what do you think? Legitimate concerns, or is it oversimplification?
I think it's oversimplification because you cannot compare Swat with Waziristan. Swat is a permanently settled area since 250 years, whereas Waziristan has never been a settled area since even during British regime. There was a law which was based on tribal norms and tribal values, and no British law was implemented for the tribal area people. They have developed their own system of justice, their own system of norms. Even the Taliban, they had full authority on Waziristan area, but they did not impose ban on music. I have seen different shops open on music because those are in the tribal norms. So I don't think that it is their demand. They actually wanted to have at the moment for a temporary period a peace zone, because the Taliban forces, they get people from all over Pakistan. I have seen people coming from Karachi, from Punjab, from Balochistan and other areas, and they get themselves recruited with Taliban in the name of Sharia. So it will be a it will be ideological defeat if they say that we should restrict ourselves to Waziristan only.
Isn't that exactly the problem? Even if you give them an area where they get to implement what they think Sharia is, that there are people coming there, getting recruited, they have bases, safe houses, cells in other parts of the country, and these people are being sent back. So their ideology is not going to stop at that border. The ideology is going to permeate in the rest of the country. Isn't that a cause for concern?
Yes. It's a matter of concern. If you see the present situation, Taliban are running their courts in Karachi, in Lahore, in Peshawar, in other areas where people go to get justice and a speedy justice, because the entire judicial system is collapsed and people don't get immediate justice from the normal procedural courts where they go with their cases, and for 20 years the proceedings are going on until the Supreme Court person dies and no justice given to him. So functionally, Taliban courts are doing justice and listening cases, and people voluntarily going there. This is a very strange phenomena in Kohat, in Bannu, in Peshawar, in other parts of Waziristan, even in Karachi and in Lahore district.
Shouldn't then the Pakistani state be more worried about it? I mean, that's the parallel system of government we are talking about. Rather than fixing your system, now you have parallel systems of government in the rest of the country. Shouldn't the Pakistani state be very worried about this?
The only solution lies with Pakistani government is to develop a very prompt, efficient and honest judicial system in the country. Writ of the state cannot be established with gun. Writ of state is established by justice and prevalence of law and order in the country. And the state of Pakistan has badly failed in both of these areas.
What happens to the ideology, Oria? We see, the TTP being anti-Shia, anti-minority, and anti-women. Do you think that ideology also permeates when they send their people back to the rest of the country?
Yes, it's again a very dangerous question, and that's the question which has to be resolved during the talks, because the emergence of Taliban has multivarious reasons, and one is that unfinished agenda of the implementation of the Islamic articles of the Constitution. Number one, people become disgruntled from the implementation of the Constitution, like people who disgruntled because you don't implement human rights articles of the Constitution. Second thing is the American intervention in Afghanistan, and they have the same blood, same language, same habits, same traditions, so they became revengeful. And the third was a complete U-turn by the Pakistani government. First they were supporting all these people, and now they've just turned their back and they said, we are going to kill you. So the multi-reasons. You cannot fight the insurgency without having a detailed study, and I'm afraid that the Pakistani government has not completed its homework, and they don't know from where they can hit the Taliban, not by gun, but by dialogue.
Dr. Hassan Askari Rizvi, what Oria is saying, some of those elements could be scary for any government. Do you think the Pakistani state realizes that these could be some of the fallouts of talks, and are they doing something about it?
I think the mindset in the government circles is divided, And the Taliban-like thinking has penetrated deep into the society as well as in the state system. Therefore, the whole notion of the primacy of the state and also of the constitution is in question. If Pakistani state cannot establish its authority by violence, what the hell Taliban are doing? They're also using violence for that purpose. There are a lot of countries where justice does not exist the way there is injustice in Pakistan, but that does not necessarily mean that violent movements come into existence. There are a lot of factors why this has happened. And so far as the notion of unfinished agenda of Islamization is concerned, that's the agenda of the Islamists in Pakistan, the right-wing Islamists or Taliban-like people. Therefore, there is a basic difference between the agenda of the Taliban, Islamists, and the Pakistani state. And last point is that nowhere in the world full constitution is implemented. One part of the constitution reflects the principles that need to be implemented, and there Pakistan has to do a lot. But then constitution also reflects the hopes and aspirations, the ultimate goal and the ideal that a nation wants to establish. And those principles are not really invoked for implementation, they are as guidelines.
Madhya, you've heard both Aurea and Dr. Rizvi. What is your impression? Are you more worried that the Taliban-like thinking is permeating, or do you see people being more skeptical and people looking at them and saying, no, we don't want this?
So in terms of what's going on right now, I think the country is in a state of confusion because we don't, Pakistanis are not clear as to what the government is trying to achieve. The government is pursuing dialogue with militants, they're sort of insisting on dialogue without there being any results, right? And today we saw that there's deadlock in the talks again. And so the government is pursuing this dialogue without talking to the population, right? And the population doesn't know what to think. But I think what's needed is some clarity from the government, right? A narrative about what the Taliban stands for, right? And the Taliban actually is perfectly clear and has been, about what it stands for. But what the population doesn't see is a narrative from the government side as to what Pakistan stands for and how it's in direct opposition to what the Taliban stands for, right? So there's some confusion about, I think the real danger is to see only the sort of Islamist agenda of the Taliban and not see what really will happen if the Taliban take over, Waziristan completely, North Waziristan completely. Girls' schools will be shut down. Women will have no mobility. They won't be able to do anything outside the home. There are going to be public beatings, hangings, executions. Hospitals won't have male doctors, let's say, attending to female patients and so on.
Minority problems.
Yeah, minority problems. I think it's going to be a disaster. People are not so clear about that.
Okay. Aurea, I want to find out what happens if Pakistani state makes a deal with them, and as Dr. Rizvi pointed out, other countries in the region will be very worried about it. Afghanistan, for one, will be worried about it. India will be worried about it, but also Iran. What happens to Pakistan's relationship with its neighbors?
One thing is basically will of the people and the will of the government, what type of system they want to implement. One thing, when in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, people were worried. But 37 years have passed, and Iran is still there, and they have implemented their own code of conduct, a code of life and lifestyle that they wanted, that the people wanted to have. Same as with the Taliban. Taliban, when they came in Afghanistan, I've seen the entire process going on. And the 90% of the area of Afghanistan was just taken over by Taliban without firing a single bullet. And only they had a fight for the 10% of the area in Panjshir and Kabul and other areas. So it is basically the choice of the people who are living over there. For about 75 years, the communists ruled half of the world.
But Aurea, I understand that it's a choice of the people, but we also live in a global village and we are part of a global society. We've seen Iran being isolated, and now it's kind of slowly coming back to the table and saying we want to be part of the global society. We don't want to be. The Taliban's government was not recognized by anyone but 2 countries. So does Pakistan want to be isolated like that?
No, it's not that. Do you think that China having a single party government and with a complete dictatorial regime is an isolated country? Economic reasons of the West has actually forced Nixon to shake hands with China, and the global reasons also. And this is not the first fight which we are doing it. Latin America has fought the ideological war for about 20-25 years. And one day they sat down with their rebels. In Nicaragua they sat down, in Chile they sat down, then in Colombia they sat down, and they said, we want to make our house in order. We don't want to have all this bloodshed on the basis name of the ideology. Whatever you want, we will do something. We give some concessions, you give some concessions, they are happy.
And as you say, it's the will of the people. But Dr. Rizvi, do you think the people of Pakistan are clear about what Sharia means for them versus what Sharia means for Taliban? For example, if you go to people in Pakistan and say, do you want an Afghanistan-like government, that Afghanistan-like government and the Taliban, do you think people will agree to that?
In Iran, there was a broad consensus to create a kind of the system that developed. In case of Pakistan, there is no consensus that people would like to have a Taliban-like system. In fact, the system that is provided in the constitution of Pakistan, previous constitution as well as the present constitution of Pakistan, that is broadly and generally accepted. One can improve the system over a period of time through dialogue, but you can't impose any philosophy, any outlook, any ideology through gun. And Taliban have a right to present their ideas. What they need to do is they accept the primacy of the constitution. Then, like the Islamic political parties in Pakistan, they can present their point of view to the people. And if they get votes, if they get support, they have every right to bring their system and change the constitution. Otherwise, there is no other way that Pakistan can accept the system that existed. Even in case of Afghanistan, yes, in Afghanistan, their system was working because 25% population of Afghanistan was living outside of Pakistan. Afghanistan Taliban system was working because Pakistan was helping them. Pakistan was supporting them.
And it wasn't working 100%. There was a civil war going on in Afghanistan for the longest time.
That's
so
right. There was a problem.
Okay, let me come to you, Madhya. What happens to Pakistan standing in the international community? Pakistan's already taken a lot of beating in the eyes of the world. Even now, they're saying that members of Al-Qaeda are going from Pakistan to Syria. So every time you hear Al-Qaeda, every time you hear terrorism, unfortunately, you also hear Pakistan. What happens if Pakistan gives legitimacy to these groups?
Right, so if Pakistan gives legitimacy to these groups in North Waziristan, let's say, right, it's not going to stop there. That's not a sustainable solution, right? It's not a steady state that's going to continue. So if it gives legitimacy, that means you're giving them space to expand, right? So if you're giving them space to expand, you're giving them space to possibly launch attacks outside Pakistan's borders, right? We know they'll continue launching attacks within Pakistan because the Taliban's goal is not just to have control over a small part of Pakistan. It's to, their stated goal is to impose, their system, Sharia, of their kind, all over the country and overthrow Pakistan's government, whom they don't recognize as legitimate. So one, they're going to expand within Pakistan, and then I think they're going to use that platform to launch attacks. We've already seen some kind of, there's crossover with terrorist groups that are, against India. There's crossover with other, they have, their sympathies are obviously with the Afghan Taliban. So we're going to see perhaps attacks in Afghanistan, perhaps attacks in India. Not maybe next year, but in the long term, if this situation is allowed to persist and if they're given space, and then Pakistan standing in the world just completely nosedives. Right?
Oria, I really want to bring you in here. Pakistan can already not control the groups that are within its borders. We see Mumbai happen. Non-state actors from Pakistan are blamed for that attack. What makes anyone think that Pakistan will be able to control these guys once it makes a deal with them?
I don't think so that the corollary which is being established and the co-relationship is being established, that if they get a safe haven in an area, they will flourish and they will go beyond the border. One very important thing, if you have just read the history of people who are insurgents like Al-Qaeda, or have you read the War of the Flea and the General Zaps of Vietnam movement? They don't want safe havens where they could be easily identifiable. They don't want identifiable places. They are always living in hideouts in a places where there's a larger communities, and then they go for guerrilla fighting. And let me tell you, Taliban has never demanded to have a safe haven like this. I know that the demands of Taliban, it will be a fatal for Taliban if they gather in Afghanistan and the entire world is having eye on them, and they will generally smash the entire community and say, look, we have finished Al-Qaeda forever. So the insurgent never want a safe haven like this, which is identifiable by all means by a state or by the international community. So the thing is that non-state actors are prevalent throughout the world. It's not only restricted to Pakistan. It starts from Burma onwards, and then Philippines onward, from Mindanao onward, and then goes till the United States of America. It's everywhere.
But
non-state.
Very few countries, Oria, in today's age, have non-state actors that are operating in so many different countries, in Europe, in North America, now we hear in Syria, that are operating in so many different countries, and in the end, ending up having Pakistan having problems with all of these countries.
So why the international community has to sit together? Why this emergence of non-state actors in different areas? Something has gone wrong something has done wrong by the international community. They have developed war theaters throughout the world. They have created war zones. I have visited Sabra, Shatila, in Lebanon. I have seen a Palestinian 17-year-old, and for another 70 years, he does not have the hope to go back to his homeland. There are plenty of the bleeding places throughout the world. And you expect the non-state actors will not emerge?
Dr. Hassan Askari Rizvi, I'd like you to jump in here.
Well, I think the Palestinian struggle cannot be compared with Taliban's challenging Pakistani state. The Palestinian struggle is generally in the international system viewed as legitimate, and Palestinians are seeking a homeland which they deserve. Whereas in case of Taliban, if they are also seeking a kind of homeland, that's the question. Can they work within the Pakistani system? Fine. If they cannot work within the Pakistani system, then Pakistani state will have to decide either to challenge them or submit to them. One of them will have to win. Otherwise, there is no solution.
Okay.
That can be through dialogue, if dialogue can work, or if dialogue doesn't work, then of course there are other means. Yes, there are non-state actors all over the world, but the problem arises when non-state actors do two things. First, they challenge the home state, number one, and then they also move beyond the territorial boundaries of the state and become an international actor. Therefore, Taliban are doing the two things. That is the reason that you have a greater problems. Therefore, Pakistani state will have to decide for an arrangement with them, either through dialogue or through coercive means. But you can't carry on
exactly.
with this method.
Madhya, add to what Dr. Rizvi just said. Yes, there are freedom fights and struggles and all kinds of things going on all over the world. And it's not just in Palestine. It's not just in Chechnya. Africa is rife with struggle. Bottom line is, at what point does Pakistan have to decide this is our territory and we take control of it? And if it doesn't do that, what happens then? I mean, because a lot of these non-state actors are using Pakistan as their base and affecting Pakistan's relationship with the world.
Right. So I think, Pakistan lives in the global context. So I think there's some value to looking at things globally, but I think we should really examine things more locally in the Pakistani context, because Pakistan's case is pretty specific. And I think there's a lot learned from looking at it within that context. So while I appreciate sort of the international discussion, right, I think we should think about it more in terms of Pakistan's national context. And I think the Pakistani state needs to establish the primacy of both its democracy, right? So its system of governance over the country, and make sure that everybody acknowledges that, right? So the Taliban, so any talks with the Taliban have to work within that context. If they don't, that's a huge threat to Pakistan's the state's legitimacy, right?
It becomes an existential threat.
Right, exactly,
yes, okay.
exactly. Sorry, so I forgot my second point. So the primacy of the Constitution is necessary
and the
for any talks.
primacy on violence, I'm sure.
And so exactly, and so for the entire country, it needs to establish, sort of a security, make sure that it's providing security to its citizens, which it isn't currently, right? And so that needs to happen. It's not happening right now, and the state needs to do something about it. Without that, the fabric of society, the fabric of the state crumbles, right? And so we've just achieved in the last year a huge victory with a second term for a democratic government, and let's just keep the democracy of Pakistan. Yeah.
Dr. Rizvi, at this point, there seems to be a lot of confusion in Pakistan. This group that the Pakistani government thinks is a terrorist outfit is negotiating with it for peace. I'm not sure that it's clear in the mind of Pakistanis whether these people are really enemies or whether these people are just, our brothers that are not happy with us. What's the deal? Why is the state not? Why is the state not succeeding in telling people how they view the TTP?
Well, the reason is that state is confused on this issue. Therefore, you hear different things. The Interior Minister in the National Assembly very recently said that, they are not against Pakistan, and Imran Khan has said that they don't want Sharia to be imposed through guns. So there is a lot of confusion, because each political party and each group is viewing the Taliban challenge with reference to its partisan interest. And Islamic groups are viewing at Taliban with reference to the denominational identity which these religious groups pursue. Therefore, opinion is very much divided. And you have also religious groups in the Barelvi and the Shia tradition who want a strict action against the Taliban, but that's the only basis is religion rather than anything.
Oria, do you think that Pakistani political leaders are viewing this whole thing in terms of future politics? Okay, I'm sorry, I think we lost connection with Oria Maqbooljan. Dr. Rizvi, I would like to bring you in here. We know that Nawaz government has had, alleged links with right-wing extremist groups. Do you think that's playing a part here?
I think the reason is that the Nawaz party draws its main support from right of the center to political rightists and Islamists. And within these kind of political circles, there is a lot of sympathy, if not support, for Taliban. Therefore, PMLN, that is the Muslim League, doesn't want to project itself as an adversary, as a critique of Taliban, because they fear that they may lose the support of these kind of people, the rightist and Islamist people, to Imran Khan and to Jamaat-e-Islami. So it is an attempt to preserve the electoral support. And in this process, the Taliban have emboldened because they know that they have sympathizers and supporters within the official circles of Pakistan.
And they also seem very clear where the government, as you said, seems confused. I'm so sorry our time today is up. We probably will be talking about this again, so stay with us. Let me thank my guests, Madiha Afzal, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy, Dr. Hassan Askari Rizvi, and Oria Makbul Jan, who is a writer and former civil servant. Thank you for watching. Make sure you leave your questions and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter and watch us again next week. Goodbye.